What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Locked In Politics, and today we are going to be doing our last election prediction of the 2024 cycle. Today is election day. If you have not already, make sure to go out and cast your vote. It is our civic duty to do so. So let's begin with Donald Trump and JD Vance's safe states. These are states that we expect Donald Trump to win by 10 or more points, or at least states that I expect him to win by 10 or more points. And it is really nothing out of the regular, except for one state in specific. I will include Maine District 2 in the 10-point column or more for Donald Trump. And the last safe state I have is the state of Florida. I do believe that Donald Trump will win this state by over 10 points. The early vote data looks phenomenal for Donald Trump there. And quite frankly, this turnout, you're going to see the crazy numbers. Honestly, I would argue closer to 2022 than 2020. I feel like it's going to be a huge red wave in Florida, and Donald Trump will easily win the state by a safe margin. So, next, we'll go to the safe states for Vice President Kamala Harris. We'll include all of the West Coast states, the state of Colorado, all of these by 10 points. Of course, we'll include Hawaii in her column, the state of Illinois, and we can come over here at Vermont, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, District of Columbia, and then Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And then we'll do Maine District 1. She will win by a safe margin. And then we'll finish off with the state of New York will be a safe margin for the vice president, giving her a floor of 191 electoral votes and Donald Trump a floor of 153 electoral votes. Next, we'll go into likely states. These are states that we really anticipate each candidate to win. However, the margin might not be, of course, over 10 points. And, if anything is really projected to be under 10 points, you never know. If it's a really good night for Donald Trump or a really good night for Kamala Harris, we wouldn't be completely shocked if these states were to flip, but we have heavy expectations on the way these will go. So, for first off, I will go for Ohio and Iowa. These states are going to go for Donald Trump. We saw the poll out of Iowa, the Seltzer poll, but really that was a complete anomaly. It's not going to happen. Donald Trump will easily win these states. Ohio, I'm seeing an 8 to 10 point victory for the president, and same thing in Iowa. 8 points, really, 8 to 10 points for the president. I don't see anything different. Really, I see these voting pretty similar like they have in past elections. Next, we'll go to Alaska. This is going to be a state Donald Trump will win. The margin might tighten a little bit. He won it by about 10 points in 2020. I think it's going to be around the same this time around, maybe 8 to 9 points, maybe tighten just barely, but still a win for the president nonetheless. We'll go to Texas. Donald Trump, I do anticipate to actually make up ground in Texas. He won the state by about 5.5, I believe, in 2020. I think he can make up a few points, frankly. My prediction in Texas is going to be a 7 to 8 point win in this state. He's going to do great in the Rio Grande. He made up, honestly, a big reason he won the way he did in 2020 because of his amazing expansion in the Rio Grande. And so if he actually does that and he'll keep turnout high in the rest of Texas, I have no doubt that he'll be the winner there by about 7 to 8 points. And that will do it for Donald Trump's likely states, giving him 219 electoral votes. We'll go to Vice President Kamala Harris, her likely states, and we will start in the state of New Mexico. I see this going to Vice President Kamala Harris by about 5 points, really close to that lean margin. I believe in my last prediction, I actually had this as a lean state. However, I am anticipating it going to her by just over 5 points, honestly, maybe like 5 to 5.5 points, really in there and really close to a lean margin, but still going to her nonetheless. And then other than New Mexico, I actually only have one more likely state for the vice president, and that is the state of Maine at large. I see going to her by a relatively likely margin, maybe 5, 6, 7 points, somewhere around there, and that will go to her, no doubt. Oh, and I actually did forget the Nebraska 2nd District, of course. Very important district and something that can come into play, certainly, if the Rust Belt all goes to Vice President Kamala Harris. So it's important. It's going to go to her by a likely margin as well. So for all the likely states for the vice president, it's going to be New Mexico, Maine, and Nebraska District 2. And what I have remaining are states that I believe will be under 5 points. and we can start with Vice President Kamala Harris's lean states. So we'll start with the state of Virginia. I see Virginia going to the vice president by about 4 to 5 points, somewhere in there, but definitely under the 5 point marker to make it a lean margin overall for the vice president. Still a win. I don't anticipate Donald Trump to win here. I think on a perfect night for the president, he could flip this state. I don't think it's going to happen tonight. Next for the vice president will be the state of New Hampshire, actually. This state, we saw some polls indicate that maybe it's going to be a little tighter, and I tend to agree with that. I believe this is going to be a 2 to 3 point win for the vice president. I feel quite confident in that number, that it'll be really close there. And quite closer than what people are thinking, honestly. But still a win for the vice president nonetheless, just by a lean 2 to 3 point margin. And then the last lean state for the vice president will be Minnesota. I anticipate Minnesota will be like Virginia this election, at least electorally, in the terms of the fact that it will be probably a 2 to 3 point state, maybe 3, 4, definitely within that range. A lean state nonetheless, and on a perfect night for the president, he could flip it. I again do not think that is going to happen tonight. However, still a win for the vice president, and that gets her to 226, that would be her relative floor tonight, regardless of how she does. Now for the lean states for Donald Trump, and I actually do have some lean states. So first, we'll look at the state of Arizona. I will go into the polls here for these swing states because it's important to look at. And RCP has Arizona at a 2.8 lead for the president. And you just have some really, really good polls for Donald Trump in the state of Arizona. And honestly, it shows phenomenal signs. The early vote data has been extraordinary for Republicans. It's a matter of, can they make sure they get that turnout on election day and they weren't just cannibalizing votes, which is okay. It's okay for people who were going to vote on election day to vote early, because things happen, life happens. Maybe you can't go out and vote on election day. Maybe something comes up at work and you can't leave, whatever it might be. It's not a cannibalized vote. It's ensuring your vote gets cast. I think it's a great thing, and regardless of the fact if it was people who were going to vote on election day or not, because you see Republicans with a huge lead in Arizona, really, by party registration in the early vote, which is great. That's exactly what they want. Go in with the lead. And because of that, in this RCP poll, a poll of polls showing a 3 point lead, I agree. I believe Donald Trump will win this state of Arizona by around 3 to 4 points, maybe lower on that scale, like 3 to 3.5. But definitely by a pretty good margin, especially for a swing state. I believe he's going to win this state, and it's you're going to be able to tell pretty easy. I believe he'll win back Maricopa County, and I believe he's going to swing this state back into his column after Joe Biden took it in 2020. The next state we are going to look at is the state of Georgia, so we can head over to Georgia now, and you'll notice a kind of a similar story. However, you notice the polls have tightened a little bit in Georgia. Donald Trump was actually up by a little bit more. You can notice he actually was up by about 2 points, and then Vice President Kamala Harris kind of making a little bit of a comeback, because a lot of polls showing a 1 point lead for either candidate, which is good news for Vice President Kamala Harris, considering she's been trailing for a good chunk of this race. So you look at the polls and you see Allison Tail, he's up by 2, insider advantage. Really great pollster, Trump up by 1. And then you do have New York Times saying Harris is up by 1 in the state. The early vote looks pretty good for Republicans, as long as Democrats don't have unreal turnout in the Atlanta metro area. If their turnout isn't supreme and absolutely amazing in Georgia, I don't see this going to Vice President Kamala Harris. She will need a miracle in Fulton County, in DeKalb County, and Cobb, and all of these counties. She's going to need the most amount of turnout by minorities as well, which you're seeing they're making up a less percentage of the early vote makeup. And frankly, because of that, I think it's just enough for this state to go to President Trump. So with that being said, I have it going as a lean state as well. I think Donald Trump will win this state by a lean margin, probably just less than Arizona. I see it as a 2 to 2.5 point win for the president in the state of Georgia, giving him 246 electoral votes and putting him with now 2 flips of Joe Biden and starting to perform better in the Sun Belt. The next state we'll look at is the state of North Carolina. 16 electoral votes there. We can take a look at the polling data in North Carolina, and it's quite similar to Georgia, honestly, actually pretty much the exact same. And you'll notice that Alice Intel again, Trump up by 2, Insider Advantage, Trump up by 2, and a bunch of Republican leads and Donald Trump leads in the state. This is exactly where Donald Trump wants to be in this state, especially if you look at the history of the state. RCP did correctly predict the winner. They predicted a Trump win in 2020, and they predicted a Trump win in 2016, and they're predicting a Trump win in 2024. And you'll notice both times they underestimated the president. And so people look at the Trump 3.6 percentage point lead, or I'm sorry, win in the state in 2016, go down to 1.3, and they say that's good for the vice president. She can make up the same margin and still win the state, and that is of course true. And maybe she could energize those minority voters, but we're simply not seeing it in the data. And frankly, with RCP having Trump up by 1.2, I am confident that Donald Trump will win the state of North Carolina by over 1 point. That's right, a lean margin again in North Carolina. I have it actually pretty much as the same as Georgia. I believe Donald Trump will win it by about. It's really close. It's really hard to make that margin decision, but I would go out and say 1.5 to 2 points on a pretty good night for Donald Trump. In his best case, he could win it by 2.5, but I'll settle down and I'll say 2 points of victory for Donald Trump in North Carolina by 2 points, and he will get the job done in this part of the Sun Belt, putting him within striking distance. Any one of the Rust Belt states will do for him. And lastly, we will go to the state of Nevada before we get into the Rust Belt. Before we get into the good stuff, we'll get into Nevada. So we can go to the polling data in Nevada, actually, so we can take a deeper look. And so it's quite important to look here, because what you see is actually an overestimation of support for Donald Trump in the state of Nevada in 2016, at least, where they had Trump up by about a point. He lost by almost 2.5. And then in 2020, RCP did a phenomenal job. They nailed it in 2020. I actually want to look at New York Times. You can see they have Harris up by 3. You can compare this to 2020, where they had President Biden up by 6. And they overestimated him a little bit, and so it's a little bit hard to tell. You have very contradictory data here. You have Harris up by 3, Harris up by 2, but then you have a Susquehanna poll, Trump up by 6, and so it's very hard to tell, of course. And then Alice Intel up by 3, Trump up narrowly in the state of Nevada, just so slightly, half a point. And my prediction for the state of Nevada in 2024 is that it will go to President Donald Trump. He will win the 6 electoral votes in the state of Nevada by a tilt margin. This is under 1 percentage point. I have this being one of the closest states in this election. However, I still have it going to him, putting him just 1 state away, 2 electoral votes away from the magic number of 270. And we will start by looking at the state of Pennsylvania, the most important state in the 2024 election. What do you see? A small Trump lead, and honestly, a small Trump surge in recent polls in the state. Overall, it's an extremely close race. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you see so many ties, so many Trump plus ones. You see Harris plus ones. Those are practically ties, but still good momentum in Donald Trump in the state last second. You'll notice both candidates ending pretty strong, almost the strongest they've been in the state. Donald Trump pretty close to the strongest he's been in the state in terms of support. And overall, this is a state where there was the attempted assassination attempt. He survived. He got shot in the face, and he said, "Fight, fight, fight." And here he is in the state of Pennsylvania with a half a point lead. They've underestimated him in 2016. RCP nailed it in 2020. They said Biden by 1.2. The result was Biden by 1.2. In 2016, Trump was just underestimated. And frankly, I think the state that Donald Trump had the attempted assassination and he survived, I believe the state of Pennsylvania will deliver him to the White House. I have Donald Trump winning the state of Pennsylvania by a tilt margin. I have him winning by almost a point, just under a point, about I would give it that 0.6 to 1 percentage point win in the state of Pennsylvania, but a win nonetheless. I have him winning this state, flipping counties like Erie, Pennsylvania, Northampton, Pennsylvania, Bucks County. Interesting to look there. He could flip Bucks County, and overall, he's going to win this state and win the presidency with it. Of course, we will still look at Wisconsin and Michigan. I'll go to Wisconsin next. We can go to Wisconsin, and we see a slight Harris lead in the RCP average. And you'll notice RCP is just phenomenal at predicting Wisconsin polls. In fact, pollsters are just phenomenal at predicting. You'll see Biden +7 in 2020. They weren't too off, only by about 7 points. It was only a Biden by less than 1 point. 2016, not too much better, only off by about 6 points in 2016 in terms of overestimating the Democrats. But that's okay. They're going to fix it this time, right? But no. Looking at the polls, there is some contradictory data here. That is for sure. Insider advantage, historically okay, at least, in terms of getting the Rust Belt right, has Wisconsin as a win. But then Trafalgar, a right-leaning pollster, there's really no doubt about it, has Harris up by 1. So is it that polls adjusted and that Trafalgar is actually on the right side of this in terms of it's going to be more left, and that this 0.4 is underestimating Vice President Kamala Harris? Or is it that insider advantage, Alice, Intel, Rasmussen, are these polls that might be seen as Republican pollsters? Are they getting this completely accurate? Obviously, we'll find out very shortly because it is election night. However, this state, I again do think, is so difficult to poll. And because of this, only being a 0.4 percentage point lead for the vice president, in terms of my prediction, I have this going to the president. This is a little bit of a, this is my personal prediction, so it's a little bit of gut feeling, taking in all the data I have and just knowing the history of the state and looking at the data. I think this is going to go to President Trump based off everything I know and everything I can use in terms of a prediction to try to make my best guess. I have this going to the president, probably by a similar margin as Pennsylvania. Honestly, it's just such a hard state to poll. But I do believe Donald Trump will win this state by a tilt margin. This is the state that I believe will be the closest state in the 2024 election by percentage, by maybe not by raw vote, but definitely by percentage. But we can look at the polls there. We can look at the state of Michigan, what I think is going to be the closest state. It's the RCP polling average. Harris up by 0.5. Donald Trump routinely underestimated in the state by a few points, something to take into consideration. Insider advantage, I want to take a look at this poll because they nailed Michigan. Let me give them their credit they deserve. Insider advantage, Biden by 2, Biden by 2.8. They nailed it in 2020, so props to insider advantage. And what do they have? They have a dead heat tie. And then it's also important to look at polls like Alice. Trafalgar, a little bit right-leaning, has Trump up by 1, however, when they don't have him up in Wisconsin. However, still a good sign for Trump. And then Alice, Intel, of course, Trump up by 2, and the rest are Harris, leads, or ties. So taking every single poll into consideration and just taking past history into consideration, momentum into consideration, I have this state going to the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, and soon to be future president of the United States, Donald Trump, by a tilt margin less than half a point, probably one of the closest states in terms of percentage, in terms of actual percentage in this election. But I have Donald Trump actually exceeding his 2016 numbers, sweeping the Sun Belt states, sweeping the Rust Belt states, and winning the election, 312 electoral votes to 226. For the popular vote, I literally think if I could predict a tie, I would predict a tie. Of course, I will not leave you guys without a proper prediction in the popular vote. I believe that Donald Trump will win the popular vote in 2024, literally by the closest margin of possible. I would honestly rather predict him winning it by 1 vote than by 1,000. That's how close I think it's going to be. Of course, it's going to be a larger number for whoever wins it, but I have Donald Trump winning the popular vote by less than half a point, literally the closest margin you can imagine, but still going to him nonetheless. In terms of my Senate prediction, I will not be doing that in terms of another video, but I have Republicans at 52 to 53 seats. I have in the House Republicans just narrowly keeping their House majority, getting a trifecta in the United States government, and giving Donald Trump the presidency and a mandate for the next 2 years. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe down below. And I will see you guys after the 2024 election takes place. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.